They say you don't notice the moment the spotlight shifts, not until you're standing in the dark. My name is Maya Verhoeven. I'm a senior strategist at Lumen & Co., or at least I used to be the one everyone turned to when things got complicated. For years, I was considered the heart of the creative team, the calm in the storm, the one with the answers. I moved to Amsterdam from Antwerp a decade ago, full of ambition and belief that hard work would always be enough. At Lumen, I found more than just a job. I found purpose, a sense of family, and for a while, I even believed I was irreplaceable. When I joined Lumen & Co., we were still a boutique firm, ambitious, scrappy, and fighting for a seat at the table with bigger players. I remember sitting in the tiny meeting room with its flickering lights and mismatched chairs, pitching ideas that would eventually turn into six-figure campaigns. Back then, I felt seen, heard, valued. I didn't need to speak the loudest, because my work did that for me. David, our CEO, trusted me in a way no one else had. He listened when others dismissed. He asked for my opinion, even in rooms filled with louder voices. There was a time when I believed that what we had was more than just mutual respect. Maybe I was naive. Maybe I wanted to believe in something pure in a world that thrives on leverage. My name was on pitch decks. My fingerprints were on every winning campaign. Clients requested me by name. When new hires joined, they shadowed me. I taught them how to listen before speaking, how to shape a brand voice without drowning it in ego. I was proud, not just of what I did, but of how I did it. Quietly, thoughtfully, with care. And then things began to change. It wasn't sudden, like a door slamming shut. It was gradual, a slow dimming of the light. I remember the first time Sophie joined a meeting I was leading. She didn't say much. She didn't have to. She had that look, eager but composed, observing everything. I thought she was just another junior shadowing me for a while. But that was the beginning of something I couldn't name back then. A shift in balance. A quiet undoing. The woman who replaced me was always there. I didn't see it at first. That's the part that haunts me now. Not that she replaced me, but that I let her. That I welcomed her in with open arms and showed her where we kept everything. The files, the coffee, the soul of the place. Like a fool, I held the door open for the person who would eventually shut it behind me. Her name was Sophie. She was introduced during a Monday team meeting, standing off to the side with her arms crossed like she wasn't trying to impress anyone. A quiet confidence, that was the first thing I noticed. Not arrogance, not exactly, just certainty. The kind of presence that doesn't demand attention but absorbs it anyway. She didn't smile much, and when she did, it was like a mirror, cold and reflective. She'll be supporting the strategy team across client verticals, David had said, eyes scanning the room. But lingering just a second longer on me. Maya, I'd like her to shadow you for a few weeks. I nodded. Of course I did. I always did what was asked. I was the dependable one. The team player. The woman who didn't need credit because her value was obvious, or so I believed. At first, I treated Sophie like I treated every promising newcomer. I shared documents, invited her to join client calls, explained how I approached each brief. She took notes. A lot of notes, but she rarely asked questions. She absorbed, synthesized, and then she started offering suggestions. Good ones. Almost too good for someone still figuring out where the bathrooms were. I remember one particular call with a retail client. We were brainstorming ways to reframe their summer campaign after a lukewarm launch. I had been developing a pivot based on emotional storytelling, something subtle, nostalgic. Just as I was about to present it, Sophie jumped in, proposing a more reactive, fast turnaround approach tied to current pop culture trends. The client loved it. David loved it. No one asked where the idea came from. No one noticed that Sophie had read every draft of my concept deck the night before. I told myself it was a coincidence, that maybe I had inspired her, that it didn't matter whose voice said it first, as long as the client was happy. But it kept happening. Little moments, almost imperceptible, but they began to build into a pattern. I'd mention an angle casually in a meeting, and the next week Sophie would present a polished version of it as her own. She never looked smug. She never gloated. But her eyes, they always flicked toward me for a split second, like she knew I knew, and like she didn't care. I started feeling invisible. Not all at once, but gradually. It began with fewer requests to lead presentations. Then I was looped in later and later on projects I used to initiate. Sometimes I wasn't looped in at all. Oh, we assumed Sophie updated you. Sophie said she'd check with you. The sentences always started the same and always ended with a silence I didn't know how to fill. I wanted to say something. I wanted to confront David. But every time I looked at him, I saw that flicker in his eyes, the one that used to be for me. And I wasn't sure if I was imagining it, or if Sophie had quietly, skillfully, taken that too. I started questioning myself. Was I being paranoid? Bitter? Was I threatened by a younger woman with new ideas? Had I become the kind of person I used to pity, clinging to relevance in a place that had already moved on? Worse than the doubt was the loneliness, the subtle shift in how people treated me. I was no longer invited to impromptu brainstorms or post-work drinks. My opinions were respected, but not acted on. Sophie, meanwhile, had her own circle, a quiet cult of admiration. Even people who once looked up to me began to orbit her instead. It wasn't personal. That's what I told myself. Until the day it was. We were preparing for the biggest pitch of the quarter, a global sustainability campaign. I had poured weeks into the strategy, staying late, building the deck from the ground up. It was one of the best pieces of work I'd done in months. The night before the client presentation, I handed it off to David for final feedback. The next morning, I wasn't on the invite. Sophie presented it. She didn't change much, just enough to put her name on the work, to soften the transitions, to add a few of her trademark phrases, to align the design style with her visual language. She didn't even glance at me across the room. Not once. Afterward, David clapped her on the back. This is exactly what we needed. Fresh eyes, bold thinking. I felt like I was watching someone else live my life. My words, my ideas, my instincts, now in someone else's voice. Delivered with more polish, more charm, more youth. And no one seemed to notice the theft. Or worse, maybe they did, and they simply didn't care. That was the day I realized Sophie didn't take anything from me. I gave it to her, because I believed that good work would always win, that loyalty would be enough, that people, especially people like David, wouldn't forget where it all started. But the truth is, they don't remember the shoulders they stand on when they're staring at the view. And the woman who replaced me, she was always there, waiting. David said he believed in me. He used to say it all the time. I believe in you, Maya. It was almost like a mantra. A quiet assurance passed between us in empty conference rooms, over dimly lit dinners after client wins, and 2 a.m. Slack messages when we were both still working, chasing the high of making something matter. And I did believe he meant it. Back then. David had this way of making you feel seen, not just heard. Seen, like he was always one step ahead, already believing in your next move before you even made it. That kind of trust was intoxicating, especially for someone like me, who built my career on being reliable, invisible, safe. He made me feel bold, and that was dangerous. We weren't lovers. I should say that clearly, for myself more than for anyone else. There were glances, yes, proximity, a certain energy, but nothing that crossed the line, nothing tangible. Only the emotional intimacy that grows between two people who need each other more than they're willing to admit. I trusted him. That was the line I shouldn't have crossed. I remember one night, late, cold, Amsterdam rain clinging to the windows of the office when we stayed back after a pitch. Everyone else had gone home. I was sitting cross-legged on the floor of the strategy room, surrounded by printouts and post-its, trying to figure out why a brand story wasn't clicking. He sat beside me without asking, just there. After a while he said, "You always look for the why behind everything. That's rare. That's why I need you here." I looked at him, tired, flattered, heart a little too open, and said, "You don't need me. You have 100 people working for you." He smiled, slow and tired. "Yeah, but I only trust a few, and you're at the top of that list." That moment used to warm me. Now it burns. Because trust, I've learned, is the easiest lie to sell when it's dressed up as loyalty. The shift began quietly. Like all betrayals, it didn't happen all at once. It unfolded over time under the disguise of pragmatism, of delegation, of letting others step up. First, he stopped asking for my opinion in meetings. Let's hear what Sophie thinks. Then my role in key projects got quietly reduced. We're rotating team leads, no big deal. He started canceling our one-on-ones, then rescheduling them, then forgetting entirely. When I asked if something was wrong, he'd smile, distracted. You're overthinking. I trust you, Maya. You know that. And maybe that's what made it worse, that he never said anything cruel. He never told me I wasn't good enough. He never accused me of slipping. He just withdrew, bit by bit, like the tide, until I was standing on dry sand, wondering where the waves had gone. I began to spiral. Not outwardly, no breakdowns, no accusations. Just quiet unraveling. I worked harder, stayed later, tried to preempt every shift before it happened, but the harder I clung, the more irrelevant I became. Meanwhile, Sophie's name started appearing in conversations I wasn't part of. Her ideas, sometimes identical to mine, were now game changers. David started quoting her, citing her, relying on her. I asked myself, over and over, did he choose her, or did I just fade too quietly to be missed? The final blow came in a partner meeting. We were reviewing a future roadmap, long-term vision, key hires, upcoming restructures. I was invited last minute, no time to prepare. I walked in and saw Sophie already seated beside him, reviewing the deck I hadn't even seen. I sat across from them, a ghost. At one point, I raised a concern about the messaging shift we were proposing. Something didn't sit right, too reactive, too surface level. I made my case clearly, calmly. David looked at me, paused, and said, I think you're holding on to an older model, Maya. We need to be faster. Sophie's thinking is more in line with where we're heading. That sentence didn't just sting, it shattered something in me. Older model. As if all the years I'd given to building Lumen's brand, shaping its voice, training its people, had suddenly expired. As if I had expired. And Sophie just sat there, still, eyes neutral, mouth unreadable. She didn't gloat. She didn't need to. After the meeting, I stood alone in the hallway. David walked past, glanced at me, and said with a quick smile, Don't take it personally. Don't take it personally. How do you not take it personally when everything you are, everything you've poured into a place, is slowly erased while you're still there to watch? That night, I went home and opened my laptop. I stared at the blinking cursor in an empty document, and I began to write this. Because if no one else would remember the way it happened, if David wouldn't, then I would. I had to. At some point, I stopped being invited. To brainstorms. To client pitches. To those spontaneous after-work drinks where half the real decisions get made. No one said it out loud, but I could feel it. The edges closing in. My role shrinking. There was always a reason, of course. Too many people in the room. We thought you were busy. Sophie's already briefed. Always reasonable, always polite. But I was there, watching Sophie step into my place. My meetings, my relationships, my rhythm. The juniors who used to come to me for feedback now asked her. The designers started sending her the first drafts. Clients quoted her. David laughed louder at her jokes than he ever had at mine. And me? I became background. A name in email threads, a signature on strategy docs no one read anymore. I told myself to be mature, to let others rise, to not take it personally. But it was personal. Every silent exclusion, every small shift. It added up. The worst part? I still showed up. Still smiled. Still tried to help. There's a particular kind of pain in staying loyal to a place that has already moved on without you. And yet I stayed. Until the silence around me became unbearable. I'm still here. Just not the same. I don't remember the last time someone said my name in a meeting. Not in that way. The way that holds weight. The way that makes a room pause, just a little. That used to be me. The one they turned to when things got messy. The one who stayed late, who made the ideas click, who cared enough to fight for what was right, even when no one else did. Now, I answer emails. I revise decks I didn't write. I watch from the sidelines as Sophie presents ideas that echo the ones I once fought for. Only now they sound fresh, exciting, revolutionary. She's not me. But she's close enough that most people don't see the difference, or they don't care to. I wanted to scream, to grab David by the collar and ask him what happened to everything he promised. But what good would that do? I know how this ends. Not with a bang, but with quiet. I thought about quitting, many times. I even wrote my resignation once, saved it in drafts. But something stopped me. Not pride, not hope, just this need to not let them rewrite the story without me in it. So I stayed and I started writing, not pitch decks or client memos, but this, my version of the truth. Because if I don't tell it, they'll say I disappeared, that I faded, lost relevance, couldn't keep up. But that's not what happened. I was erased. Carefully, slowly, politely. And the people I trusted most held the eraser. David used to say I was the soul of Lumen. Maybe that was true. But even souls can be exercised. I'm still here, still working, still walking past Sophie's glass office every morning. I smile, I nod, I stay professional. But inside I carry 1,000 unsaid things. And now, finally, I've started saying them.